this is Adam Daugherty. He serves as an NRCS District Conservationist for Coffee County, Tennessee. Adam started his soil rejuvenation journey back in the fall of 2013 with 8 long-term no-till producers on about 2,000 acres. You guys hear me all right? Yes? Okay. Since 2013, Adam currently works with over 70 producers in Coffee County, implementing diverse high biomass cover mixes on over half the cropland acres in the county. Adam has worked hand in hand with these producers from transitioning from long-term no-till production into high-functioning agro-ecological systems. Adam has been fortunate to be able to implement these systems across a wide diversity of producers and learn firsthand how to handle the ever-evolving dynamics of managing and succeeding with the transition from long-term no-till into biomass cover systems. Adam will share the results of a 3-year study involving 18 producers, 58 fields, and over 2,200 acres in corn, diverse cover crop, and soybean rotation. He will present what strides these fields make physically, biologically, and economically. Adam will also share many of the management techniques that were used and evolved with the transition of no-till into enhanced no-till and eventually into higher functioning ecological systems.
All right, thanks for that introduction, Aaron. Can give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right, can you see my screen? All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here. Appreciate the invite to talk actions tonight. I am struggling here. Okay, now I can see it. All right, but it's good to be here. Appreciate y'all taking the time out of your evenings to join this. And I'm just going to go down, like Aaron said, and talk to you just a little bit about, I titled this Transitioning from Something into a Higher Functioning System, because I've never been on most of your all's farms probably, but I think we're all starting with something and we all have the ability to transition into something else.
This guy's from Tennessee.
That is right. I am from Tennessee. All right. And speaking of being from Tennessee, let me just kind of share with you where I'm located at. Within that, let's see, let me do this. All right, now it's working. I'm located here in Coffee County, within that yellow polygon right there, northern part of Franklin County, Coffee County. Inherently good soils. I'll just go ahead and be straight up. This is a, pretty spoiled place to grow stuff. We get a lot of sunshine. We got a long growing season and we get plenty of rain. We'll average, I think it's about 54 inches a year is what we average here in the county. And it seems like since we've started that journey, it's been anywhere from about 54 to 90 inches that we've averaged over about the last 8 or 9 years here in the county. So we get plenty of rain, plenty of sunshine, and we've got an inherently good resource to grow stuff on. Coffee County, we have about 53,000 acres of reported cropland in the county, primarily corn and soybeans with some wheat. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been averaging a little better than half of that into cover systems. And annually, we are working with, around about 25,000 acres that across several producers that we're actually managing quite a bit of biomass. No matter where you're at, I think it's important that we recognize the potential of what our systems have. And I think it's important that we understand where we've been and where we're going. There's not many fields around that we've not started over here on the left-hand side with some form of soil degradation. That's what tools we had at hand, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a tremendous amount of heritage, pride, and just think we'd never got to where we were had we not started somewhere, but it's come with a cost. And here in my neck of the woods, we moved into no-till since the inception. We got a lot of fields in the county that have been in no-till production since the 1970s, and they've stayed in no-till production. A lot of that's due to our climate and for other reasons. But, I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and but I do not like to view conservation as the goal. If you think about conservation, that is just, conserving something at whatever state it's in. Not really getting any better, not getting any worse. But I have a little bit of issue with us conserving a degraded resource, especially when we have more potential. And it doesn't matter what level of degradation our soil is in, they're all in some form of degradation. They all have the ability to be completely rejuvenated into a fully functioning system. And, I started this journey with a lot of producers in no-till, long-term no-till systems, but I learned pretty quick that no-till, it looked pretty good on the surface. And don't get me wrong, it had served us well for a long time, but we can go much past no-till, and the rewards can be gained once we get into a functioning system. It's got a lot of buzzwords, from soil rejuvenation to soil health, regenerative ag. But what we're really talking about, folks, is a naturally functioning system, and us working as managers to get it where it's functioning as designed. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that we have moved plumb into a rejuvenated resource across this county. We've not, but we have moved past no-till in many, many acres, and it's been a heck of a good journey for us. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and and don't get me wrong, this is a pretty picture, and you can say a lot of things about it, but when I look at it, I probably would have used to look at it as just a pretty picture, nice setting. But now I look at it as just the processes that are going on before my eyes captured in this picture. And it's exponential. There is so much going on when we get to looking at nature and system functions, and it's overwhelming at times. And I'm not saying we're never going to understand it all, but I think we can all step back and take a look at natural processes and systems, and we can all learn and gain something from it. And, say that the rejuvenation of your soil, I've used this statement a lot, it does not start with the implementation of principles, but rather with our commitment to understanding ecological functions. That's really what we're trying to do, is to understand how this resource is designed to work and how we can grow whatever crop we're wanting to grow within these functions. Because we got to know our whys before our hows. We got to know why we have problems, why we're trying to do something. The how part's a lot easier. And, I think it's hard for us sometimes to understand our whys when we're talking about soil function, because if you need to know anything, you can just Google it. But if you actually type in what does the soil need to function in Google, it does not tell you what it needs. It just tells you what the soil functions are supposed to be. It's almost like it's just a given that the soil is supposed to perform these functions, no matter what, no matter how we manage it, it's just supposed to perform these functions. And I think we've learned that these functions will cease sometimes when it's not provided. Because what we got to realize is it's obvious for us to understand what all other living critters need to function. And we can easily understand what happens if they're not provided with what they need, from humans to cows, Sasquatches. Even for some of you Kansas City fans, I'll go ahead and throw in that second picture there. That's a state bird of Florida. Okay, so I know y'all are probably having a hard time since last night, but anyways, Kansas has got a prettier state bird than Florida. But if I show you a picture of that living organism, why is it so hard for us to understand what it needs to function? And it's pretty simple. The soil, it's got to have three things to function. No matter if you're sitting in Tennessee, you're in Kansas, or wherever you may be tuned in on this presentation, it's got to be fed, it's got to be watered, and it's got to have a stable address. So we think, it was, I'd been no-till through and through my whole career, and we thought we had these functions ceased. But once I started looking at these soils and started looking at the actual problems instead of just addressing the symptoms, it became pretty apparent to me why our long-term no-till soils were not functioning as designed. And if our long-term no-till function or soils are not functioning, I can guarantee you that tillage system soils will be even lacking with more of these problems. But we'd always looked at symptoms. You know, the soil was starved. Well, how come was it starved? Was we not putting enough juice to it out of the back of the trucks? No, the problem was that the sun shines every day, but we don't have something there to capture it every day. And then we had erosion. Well, why do we have erosion? The erosion was a symptom. What do we usually do to fix it? We'd put in some kind of diaper to fix it, but we never fixed the problem. The problem was the surface was naked. We had bad infiltration. Okay, that's just a symptom. The problem is that we didn't have the soil covered and we had low aggregation. And then we had compaction in our soils. Well, folks, compaction is not a problem. All right, it's just a symptom. The problem is a lack of aggregation. And then we get to talking about this biological diversity. You know, we'd heard rotation, corn, beans. Well, our rotation for the last 50, 60 years have been corn, beans, henbit, a little bit of buttercup and chickweed. So for 50 years, I hadn't been growing nothing but 5 things continuous. So we started looking at really fixing problems instead of just addressing symptoms. And one thing that helped us be able to do this, and one thing that's helped me throughout understanding how this is supposed to work, is I quit thinking in cycles. Cycles are designed to be broken. Now, I'm not saying there's not a water cycle, there's not a nutrient cycle, not trying to alleviate those terms, but I try to think in flows now. I try to think in flows of energy, flows of biological populations, flows of nutrients in the system, flows of water. We always know we're going to have high and low flows, but we're always going to have something in the system and maybe not have the spout just completely turned off, whereas the cycle has been broken. And the main reason why we look at doing this is when we get these soils functioning as designed, no matter where we're at, if you're sitting here in Coffee County or you're in Kansas, east part of the state, the west part, north or south, it don't matter. But when we get these soils functioning, we get a resilient resource. And that's our goal. Through getting the soil to function as designed, we get resiliency. And notice over there, I've got a lot of goods. I don't have any perfects or any greats because it's going to be hard. There's going to be times that it's great, okay? But what we're trying to do is alleviate the pores and the bads. And if we can be good moisture, good temperature, good nutrient flow, good infiltration, good, and start stacking these goods, we get resiliency. And I'll take a lot of goods over one great and maybe a couple pores and a couple goods. Let me break it down, soil health, real simple, because that's, I guess, kind of what's brought me to the table talking to you about is how we've practiced this soil health. And it's a real simple process. And however, though, sometimes we have a hard time accepting it. I think we all understand it, but we have a hard time accepting it to be this simple. And the energy system for all this, no matter where we're at, it's the sun. And there's not but one thing that can absorb sunlight, and that's a living plant. And all that living plant's doing is giving off oxygen and leaking food into the system to promote the biological populations, which it's a tremendous population. We're just at the tip of the iceberg, folks, I think, and what we're understanding everything that goes on biologically in the soil. And that's the beauty of the system. We're starting to understand what we've done that has halted some of this promotion of the biology. And now that we're starting, there's farmers all across the US, all across the world that are simply just trying to promote the biological functions of their soil. And it's pretty amazing what happens when we do that. But the one thing, my son Brady, when he is 9 years old, he's 15 now, he drew this picture up and, and explained just what I'd said. But the thing that took home from that is I asked my son when he's 9, I said, Brady, what happens if we don't have a plant out there growing? And he said, Dad, it won't work. And, that just pretty much hit home with me that, it's pretty simple the way this system's designed to function. Like I said, we may not have to accept it, but I think we can all understand it. And then we talk about our whys. We're all farming some fields that have some level of degradation, and some's going to be worse than others, but they all have the potential for rejuvenation. But I don't think that we can progress positively if we're in denial of our whys. I think that, we cannot keep fooling ourselves that when we see the rivers running brown, when we see the nutrient loads in public water supplies, and when we see dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, and when we see no resilience in our field, I think that we got to become out of denial that, they may be a better way to do this. And, been a lot of talk about digging in your fields, and I have nothing against shovels and nothing that we'll learn when we get to looking at these indicators. But I really think that the most important tool for our farm is a mirror. I think we got to take a hard look in the mirror and have the integrity to not be in denial of better ways to do things. Because the how part is pretty simple, folks. Once we start understanding how these systems are designed to function, we just start implementing the management which promotes these functions, and we start disposing of, weaning off the ones that don't, that degrade it. But the tricky part is we've got to maintain or increase our bottom line while we're doing this. If it was all just about soil health, it'd be easy to do if we didn't have to worry about going broke. And, it's going to be different for everybody, and that is a real deal out there. It was easy transition from us coming from long-term no-till. It may not be as easy a transition for others, but it will. The principles apply. The sun shines and the plants grow no matter where you're at. I'll just walk you down a little bit of not saying it's my philosophy. I'm just going to be, straight up with you and tell you kind of how we done it here and some of the things that we focused on. Because we focused on, me working for NRCS and have these new ideals talking about bugs and carbon and mycorrhizal fungi and all this stuff. And if I go out there and start talking to my producers and say, man, then we're just going to cut out all your inputs, I'm going to have a hard time working with folks. So we started looking at working on maximizing the efficiency of our applied nutrients prior to looking at the reductions. Reducing inputs was not the goal at first, but maximizing all this stuff that we're doing anyways. Let's start maximizing our efficiency, because I think it's hard for us to starve a profit out of a degraded resource just by reducing inputs, because we're looking at trying to create a resilient and efficient system. And the efficiency, once we get down to the simplistic approach, it's driven by the biology. Okay, it's driven by all these underground workers and all these synergistic effects as we start tapping into organic nutrient cycling, natural pest resistance, the way the system was designed to function. It's about the biology, the life that's below our feet. And then we just start adapting accordingly. And I know that sounds kind of simple, but really that's the way I think it's to be done. And I don't say adopt, or the how. It's an adaptation. You're going to have to adapt to depending on your field, your farm, your goals. It's always going to be different. Very dynamic system. And just talking a little bit about input reductions, which we're in corn bean country here. Nitrogen was the last for us to go. But NP and K, they're not the only inputs on your farm. Our first most profitable reductions came out of the sprayer tips, where we're going across soybeans at 5-6 passes a year to be able to control palmer, pigweed, to being able to, get by with a burn down and maybe one post. That starts adding up on the billfold. And not only does it add up on the billfold, it starts adding up on the soil biology as well as we have those reduced trips. And then, when I'm talking about nitrogen last to go, there's different formulations of nitrogen that are a lot less loaded with salt than just your traditional dry fertilizer. So, that's a 3-hour talk in itself. But, we started looking at a lot of different formulations, trying to reduce salt loads and, still supply some commercial fertility, but try to make it as least detrimental on the biology as we could. When we get to talking about the house, this is just kind of my flavored deal, just to break it down real simple. 4 primary driving principles to be able to get a soil functioning as it was designed. But you got to keep it covered. The house has got to be protected. I've not found out any way that we can lead to promotion and function of the resource when we leave it naked and it can't take the energy out of a raindrop or the wind blowing. We've got to have, just like a 9-year-old drawing said, we have got to have living plants out there. That's what drives the system. That's what feeds the system. And there's nothing else out there that can absorb sunlight and feed the biology. And then we've got to pump diversity. I'm not saying that we've got to understand all of nature's collaborations, but I think we need to embrace them and accept them. How many, if diversity was not important, why wouldn't we go look at a lot of naturally occurring monocultures? They're just not out there, folks. So we might as well trust diversity in the way it's created to work. And then y'all probably seen this before: minimize disturbances, both chemical, physical, and biological. I'm just gonna break this down. Understand what tillage does and what restores its effects. Once we understand what it takes to overcome what detriments that the tillage has done, we'll probably find a way to eliminate it from our operation. And that goes straight forward into chemical disturbances as well as biological. Once we start understanding the detrimental effects that some of our management's having, we'll find ways, instead of just saying quit overgrazing or quit over applying chemicals or quit tilling. Once we start understanding the effects they have, then if we look in that mirror and we really want to get serious about it, we'll figure out a way to get by it. And then integrate the livestock or mimic the livestock integration. I think that we can get in certain climates in Coffee County. I know we can get the soil functioning at a pretty high level by doing the first 4. We can get it functioning even a higher level by integrating livestock. And I think that principle is going to hold true no matter where you're at. Let me walk you down just a few videos showing you the how we done it. All right. I'm not saying this is how you all are going to do it, but this just shows you how we done it. We started with clean no-till, and we started planting covers, and we started burning them down before the biomass got big and we got scared of it. So this is kind of year 1, what it looked like. A little bit of biomass out there. This is late March, early April for us. This is the same year. There's no need for a crop roller or anything right there. But farmer got one in and we had to try it out. But that looks pretty good. And don't get me wrong, that is a lot better than standalone no-till. But if you look at that corn crop we was planting, you'll see that I've still got a lot of problems right there. The soil's not covered. All right. You can see I've got algal blooms where I got, excess nitrogen not being used up in the system as it was designed. Still got a lot of problems. Okay. And we learned real quick that it's going to be hard to get this resource functioning when we're still planting by the calendar, doing it the way we've always done it. When we give in to peer pressure, get nervous when we start seeing the planters go down the road on the no-till fields. So, it'll be hard to do it if we're still doing it by the calendar. So you move into year 2, let the covers get a little bit bigger. So we started doing this, didn't have no problems. It was better than year 1. If you look at in between those corn rows right there, we've got more biomass, we've got more soil coverage. However, that's not mimicking nature. That carbon sitting up there is not going to be able to cycle like it is. It's not going to form that moisture conserving mat as well as it can. So we still had a lot of things to do. And then that's just, we had the cover grown, we had grew the roof, we just wasn't managing the shingles right. So go down the same day that last slide was, and I tried to use this same producer just to kind of show some of his progression. Same covers as what we just got done running in, but now we're just managing them a little bit different. And in my neck of the woods, that's about as good as it gets for corn. That cover mix right there, it's got probably a carbon nitrogen ratio in the high 30s, low 40s. It's going to be perfect for corn. But now look at what our soil looks like. That's starting to look a lot more like like nature designed it to work. Old carbon on the, or old residue on the ground being cycled with new plants coming up through it. So now we're starting to get somewhere. So that was, you know.
Adam, what was
Yes, ma'am.
that? What was that cover crop mix?
That mix right there was a mix of cereal rye, triticale, crimson clover, hairy vetch, daikon radish. And I'll get into some mixes here just a little bit.
Okay, and then when do you usually plant corn in your area?
No-till corn will start going in the 1st of April.
Okay, that's our
And,
time frame too.
And
Okay.
our cover corn, it just typically it's going to depend on the growing season. But we're going to be getting pretty serious about getting cranked up by the middle of April. With soil temperatures, we like to get soil temperatures pushing 60 degrees with enough biomass to be able to crimp or at least get some residue down on our cover fields.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You know, and just as human nature goes, if a little bit's good, then a little bit more is better, then a little bit more is even better. So we went into that, then this here kind of became the norm. And then we got to doing stuff like this, got a brand new roller in, and I never thought you could wrap a roller, but we sure enough did in this mix. There was about 18,000 pounds of biomass in that. Was scared to death because that looks pretty intimidating as you look back through there and thinking about producer sitting there ready to plant beans into it, and that's what he's got to go through. But by the end of the day, we get that crimped and start planting. That's a lot less intimidating. And you know, that's, you know, successful planting is not just being able to run a planter through the field without cussing and getting it wrapped up and tearing chains and sprockets and all that kind of stuff off. We actually want to hit our desired planting depth, planting population, and get these hybrids off to the races, just like if it was coming out of clean no-till. But you know, there's that planter running, took the same shot right there, and there's the start of 80 bushel beans that didn't have any inputs after that planting. And then we got to planting corn in this stuff. You know, this is not, it's tall, but it's not real thick. Okay. So we're sitting right there planting corn, sticking them all 2.25 inches deep, whatever we want to do right there. But however, we do not want our corn starting off its life in that mess. Okay. That mess is good and leads to a lot of resilience for us, but we don't need our corn starting off in that. So then we got to rolling behind the planters, and we've had no detrimental impact. We'll usually go in and take off on about a 10 to 15 degree angle from what we planted from the planter, and make sure we're keeping the tires off the rows and not getting into any of that. So, you know, we got to doing a lot of this. And we done this for about 3 or 4 years, studied a bunch of fields, and everybody likes to graph stuff. So there it is. And that's all of it in a graph. And, you know, the take home message from that is it's complicated, folks. This is a very dynamic system. It wasn't never the same from day one to what it is today to what it's going to be tomorrow. It's a very dynamic system. And, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, it's a logistical nightmare. And there's a lot of dynamics to it. And, you know, it's not simply adding coverage to no-till. So y'all was asking a little bit about the mixes. Where we started out at in the beginning was just a simple 5-way mix. Now, I think one thing that we have done right here in the county is we've never been afraid of diversity. You know, we started out with a basic 5-way mix, and then we moved into currently those 5 things, and then we add all this other stuff. And we about eliminated cereal rye from any of our mixes. We're far enough south, got a good enough climate that we don't have to rely on cereal rye to be able to get plenty of biomass going into the spring planting season. And basically barley has substituted for cereal rye for us. It doesn't lignify near as quick, gives us a little bit more on the logistical window. So we're big fans of barley and triticale carrying a lot of the weight in our cereals and our blends. You know, we've done a lot of analytical testing in these fields, a lot of biological testing. You know, over a period of time, Luckily, the test showed us kind of what we wanted to see, what we hoped was happening. But even without any testing, you can look at these. This is one of my fields. And after 2 years, I really didn't care what the test showed. I knew good things were happening. So, technically a little bit what's going on under our feet. I mentioned earlier how important the biology is. If we start promoting and managing to promote biology, good things are going to happen. That workforce is going to happen. Maybe a lot of things we don't understand, but just in a 3-year span for us, the 1-day CO2 respiration, we started out on an average. This is across 58 fields, about 2,000 acres and about 18 producers. Started out at about 50. By the end of the 3-year study period, we were averaging at 350. The soil health calculation performed by Dr. Rick Haney, we doubled it in 3 years. The PLFA, if you're not familiar with that, that's the phospholipid fatty acid test. It's measured in nanograms of biology of basically bugs, their mass per gram of soil. We started out at about 2,500. So that's where we'd got after 25 years of no-till. In 3 years, we doubled that to almost tripled it. I put the outlier of 6,500 up there just to show there was a clear outlier. Everywhere we integrated livestock was better than we were when we were just covers and no-till alone. The orange line, the water extractable carbon, shows where it started out, and then we made a big nosedive. Then we started gaining, and then started. Now that's starting to trend on up in a more linear fashion. But this worried me at first before I really understood what was going on. But basically, what biology we had in the soil was really liking the buffet that we was putting out there, and it was consuming the water extractable carbon at a quicker rate than what we could produce it. Now everything's just kind of gotten an equilibrium where we're diversifying more, the fungal components increasing in our soil. So all that's just working. So that just shows that not only what the picture shows, but that's just some of the data to back up the results of the biology that we've been promoting over those 3 years. And the reason why some of this biology is doing good is, you remember what I talked about earlier, it takes 3 things, right? It's got to be fed, it's got to be watered, it's got to have a stable address. Well, we can take care of that stable address pretty quick, and we can feed it through keeping a living plant. But controlling that water, that's hard at times. But you cannot control the water without controlling the temperature, and vice versa. If you look at the forest, that was my natural template that I had to look at. Look at my soil temps in the forest, and look at our common systems from no-till soybeans, small covers, big covers, all the way into tillage systems. Look at what a 92-degree day on June 24th at what our soil temp looked like. June 24th is a pretty important time pollination-wise here in our neck of the woods on a crop. Okay, so you can just see the more we mimic nature and get to managing that biomass, what effect it has on soil temperature. When we start looking at infiltration rates, all right, we get plenty of rain here, usually. We're always a week away from a drought, it seems like. But our conventional tilled systems, they're less than 1 inch. Long-term no-till, after 20 or 30 years of no-till, was at 2 or 3 inches an hour. Then we start looking at comparing some of these cover systems, and look how quick that these systems start responding. When you start covering the surface of the soil, keeping it where it doesn't seal off, and keeping active aggregation and pore space in the soil, it's amazing. Luckily, the most limiting thing that we're lacking is our ability to manage our water. Luckily, that's the first thing that returns when we start applying some of these systems. And, one thing to keep about it, infiltration rates, they're very dynamic, but the trends are static. When we're sopping wet in saturated conditions, these cover crop fields, they're not going to infiltrate 20 inches of water today, where we've just come out of a big rain and a 2-inch snowfall. They're saturated, but they're going to manage water better than the conventional neighbors will at any given time. And I'll add that, when we went into this, we thought, well, this is just for drought resilience. okay, just to get us through the dry times. It works in all times. And, you know, this is something that we didn't think about logistically starting out. But when our no-till and our conventional ground's too heavy, too wet to be planting, we're planting in these covers. And of course, when all the ground's prime, everybody's rolling, we're planting in. Then every year, it seems like we'll get a condition when it's dried off and the no-till guys and the conventional guys, it's gotten too dry, the planter won't take the ground. And I'm not saying it's not dry, but we're still planting. Not only is this logistical window wider during our planting season, but the conditions are more optimal under all climatic conditions. Now, I'm not saying that we may not be mudding in corn a little bit, but it's a lot better off than if we was out there trying to no-till or plant in the conventional right then. And I'm not saying that when it's hard and dry that we're not planting into some dry conditions, but we're planting in a lot better conditions than what we would be if we were standalone no-till or conventional. Not only is this planting conditions wider, but the growing conditions as we go through the growing season. You know, think about what happens to those conventional fields when we get that big spring rain and everything seals off, when we got those saturated, flooded out bottoms, got all the replants, got all that business going on. To the next extreme, when we got the hot, dry times on our hills and everything's dying up there. So no matter if we're in the wet times, the good times, or the dry times, a resilient, rejuvenated, functioning soil will give you better conditions under any of those times. If you're in Tennessee, if you're in Kansas, or anywhere in between. And, you know, the wet, the good, and the dry, that takes care about all the times. Let's talk a little bit about moisture. No, this is for Kansas State, which, you know, Kansas, you all got pretty big variance in your moisture from as you move from west to east. But it requires moisture to grow covers. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm not going to deny that. However, I will make a statement that you cannot conserve moisture without covers, period. Bare ground does not conserve moisture. And let's think about whether you're me sitting here in Coffee County or you're sitting in Kansas. What do we really have the ability to manage in dryland systems? When it rains, or how much of that rain we can capture and store. There's a lot more days with us the potential to lose moisture than they are for us to capture it. You know, and we wouldn't think that we could go out in the Walmart parking lot and plant a crop and it do good. So if our fields have pretty much that same function, why we expect different out of them? And I'm gonna leave you with this just a little bit, because I'd say, you know, we may have some fallow producers or some folks that are going to be around fallow systems. What natural principle does fallow mimic? And think about any fallow ground you may see. How did it manage prior to us having a hand on its strategies? What did that fallow ground before we decided to manage it? How did it manage? And I think no matter where we're at and what we're doing, I think if we look at thinking about that thinking of it that way, I think it'll help us along these systems no matter what we do. And folks, with that, I humbly thank you for your time, and I truly do from the bottom of my heart wish you all the best in this journey. And I'm in no hurry and would be glad to answer any questions, or I'll try to answer any questions anybody may have. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Adam. That was fantastic. Folks, if you want to ask a question, you can either put it in chat or you can unmute yourself or raise your hand, whatever you want to do to ask a question. One thing I want to point out, our soils in Kansas are primarily prairie soils. So they are used to having a lot of grass, and grass has a very dense, intricate root system. And once you start putting grass in it, wheat is, you know, we have a lot of wheat in our rotation, but wheat doesn't stay around very long. We harvest it. Once you put a grass into the system, it really helps a lot with our soils. And I've seen in a production setting where, you know, if we have a clay pan, once you put a grass into that system, the roots can grow into that clay pan a lot more and take use of a lot more of our soil profile rather than just the very, very top few inches that we're farming. So incorporating a grass or a permanent cover crop really makes a big difference. So
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of potential. You know, the principle's the same. It depends a lot what your goals are, what, you know, what your production model is. But there's tremendous, you know, potential in looking at some perennial rotations in your cropping system, especially if you got the livestock. You know, and that's kind of what I was leading into talking about, where, you know, the fallow system, you know, most what part I've drove across out there, you know, started as a native prairie, and you know, it had a mixture of grasses. It had a mixture of, it had some legumes in it, had some forbs, and also what else it had? It had a big mob of buffalo that went across. It had a naturally designed I&J roller crimper going across and taking about a third and putting the other 2/3 down. And really, if you look at the folks who have been extremely successful, uh, probably across your region, across all regions, that's simply the framework that they're mimicking. You know, that's the framework they're mimicking with the livestock. There's a difference in putting some cows out on cover crops versus mimicking buffalo with them, and you know, it ain't nothing to do with the livestock. It just goes into how well we're managing them, and you know, there's, you know, that, you know, we've got wheat in our rotation here too, which we're, you know, we're not near as big a wheat country as you all are, but you know, you got a pretty finite rooting depth, and then, you know, and I have, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against having wheat in the rotation, and you know, I have nothing against corn in the rotation, soybeans, or whatever anybody else wants to grow, but there's not any cash crops that we're harvesting annually that grow 365 days a year. And that's where our strategies need to be when it's not in wheat, or it's not in corn or soybeans. For goodness sakes, whatever you do, plant diversity. You know, plant diversity, and I think that's just where some people have, you know, we don't really have an understanding of ecological functions. We think there's some kind of magic. You know, people ask me, I plant 3 things, I plant 5 things. You know, there's no magic in it, and you know, research is not showing a lot of magic in, you know, trying to do these trials, 3 versus 5 versus 7, you know, but that ain't the way nature, you know, if we could sit there and replicate nature and plot trials, then we'd have this thing licked anyways, and we don't. So, you know, I just, you know, don't defy nature. You know, let's just use some common sense. We want different rooting depths, we want different rooting sizes, and you know, just think about, because it's all about the biology that drives this. How many of us would keep going to a buffet that had nothing but mashed potatoes every night that we walked in there? We wouldn't go there, right? We'd finally get tired of it. Now, there'd be a few of us that really flourished on mashed potatoes, and we'll be there 3 squares a day, and that we'd be the ones ruling the world. But think about, you know, why you have, but when you got 50 things growing out there, make your buffet as appetizing as it can be to the biology, because that's what we're trying to promote. And that's what's going to take care of our lack of understanding in the natural system. That's how, when we start planting all these diverse species, we naturally have less weed pressure. We naturally have less pest pressure, less diseases. And it's, you go right across the fence row that maybe somebody's conventional or no-till, and they have the same thing, you know, so you know, they'll have those problems. So, you know, don't defy nature. I ain't saying you got to understand it, but just don't defy the diversity. You know, I say plant as many things that you can fit through your planting system that will grow during the growing conditions in which you're putting them in there.
interesting. Okay. As far as equipment goes, do you think the roller crimper is necessary to get it to make a reasonable seed bed to cut through that much biomass?
No. To be honest with you, unless we've got hairy vetch in the mix that's gotten pretty mature and bad to wrap, or winter peas that are bad to wrap, about 90% of the stuff we will plant green standing and then roll afterwards.
Okay, so you do roll it down after. Are you killing the cover crop with the roller crimper?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Everything we do, everything we are doing mainstream is being chemically terminated.
Okay.
We've not had any success within our planting windows of with these diverse mixtures of terminating with a roller crimper. If you're interested in terminating using roller crimpers or light technology, I think you need to be looking at pretty simple species mixes that are going to mature when you want them to, or a combination of species that are going to mature within a time frame together, you know. But now, like those videos that I'm showing right there, where we're at that maturity, if I go through and run a roller crimper in that, you know, I'll get termination on some of the cereal rice, some of the cereals, and in 2 weeks, you know, it'll be lush crimson clover, vetch, all the legumes are going to be coming back. Winter kill wise, most of our brassicas will winter kill on us here. Flax will winter kill on us as well.
Yeah.
But everything we're doing from a mainstream standpoint is being terminated with chemicals. It's about a 50-50 or 60-40 mix. We've shifted a lot to a gramoxone burn down, depending on if it's warm enough, the weather's warm enough, and basically that's just one less shot that, or time that our field has to see Roundup. We can come back with our GMO hybrids, but a lot of Roundup ready products are being grown, so we can come back if we have to with Roundup, but we can't come back with a gramoxone at other times. So it's kind of been a little bit of a shift to be able, where we went to quite a bit of gramoxone burn downs.
Okay. Yeah, I know I think the Auburn lab has done a lot of work with the roller crimpers trying to design something, but like you say, you've got to time it just right to get it to really terminate that way, so that the chemical gives you a lot broader thing.
Oh, I mean, you know, no doubt we could terminate with a roller crimper here in our area, but we'd be planting corn about the middle of June and you know, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a trade-off. I'm doing some experimenting on my farm personally, where I'm going no chemicals, which I'm a small scale grower, mainly grow produce, do a lot of sweet corn, and looking at, and basically I'm doing it with a diverse mixture. I think I've got 14 different species in our growing out here now that'll be going into sweet corn. And basically what I'm finding is if I'm going to be able to get a termination, you know, I'm just pushing the planting later and later and later as those species get more mature. Okay.
And for planting equipment, what has changed, or has anything changed? Are you just doing a no-till? You doing any residue managers? What are you doing to get the seed in the ground properly?
Well, we drive the tractors forward and pull the planters forward. Okay. No, really.
What's important?
Yeah. We've not been you'll tear a planter up if you try to plant it backwards, but that's just kidding around. No, we've not made any major changes to the planters. We were running no-till planters. Prior to this, we're running the same planters that we were. Not much on row cleaners. As we get in this biomass, we're not running those much. They're bad to wrap. We will utilize row cleaners some in our cotton. We're looking at some of that. Mainly, you know, it's a till disturbance right there where we're running those row cleaners. So in our neck of the woods, that's a good place to promote an imbalance of nutrients and get a pigweed started, where we utilize that tillage. Most planters starting out, we were running leading coulters, primarily either a 13 wave or a bubble leading coulter. And now we've kind of shifted away from some of that to where we're running just straight disc openers. It just all depends. It just all depends, which of course the red planters have got the offset disc openers. Not had any problems planting with them throughout any of our growing conditions. Closing's where it's at. And closing wheels, just to be honest, are about like a tackle box. You just about need 4 or 5 different good fishing plugs in your tackle box, depending on the conditions. And that's just one thing that you get into a little bit of inherent soil properties, moisture. There's just not one closing wheel that's just perfect for all conditions. Now there's some of them that do not work good unless you're wanting to bale residue or unless you just like getting them stuck out of your planter. But we really concentrate on closing, and luckily, as you start getting this real mellow stuff that you're planting in, where you quit planting in dirt and now you're starting to plant into aggregated soil, it's a lot more forgiving no matter what closing system you're working. And so that just, but planter wise, we're running from wore out spring loaded John Deere 7000s. That was the first no-till planter that's on that farm, to the top of the line, hydraulic downforce, is good a planter as money can buy. And we're getting results. Now, don't get me wrong, the good of money the planter can buy, they have some quirks that will lead to a better stand. But we're getting seed in the ground at a consistent depth where we want it, we're getting the yield.
Okay, cool. That's neat. One thing, and just like you keep mentioning aggregates, and aggregate stability, that sort of thing. If anybody's wondering about that, Deanne Presley covered it in the first presentation. So it's an interesting concept and really important to think about how the biology affects the structure, because that's really what it does quite a bit.
It not only affects it is the structure.
No, yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of folks have seen the slate test or whatever. You can take any combination of sand, silt, and clay that you want, from the best inherent soil in the world to the sorriest, and without the biology, drop it in that slate test and you know what's going to happen. Whereas you can take the sorriest inherent soil with a little bit of biology and you know what's going to happen. So the biology is the structure. The rest of it's mineral. The other stuff's mineralogy.
Yeah. And you have silt loam soils, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we'll have a silt loam to a silty clay loam to we don't have much sands. We get some pretty heavy clays, not shrink swell clay, but we get some pretty heavy clays.
Okay.
But just about everything that we've got that we drive a tractor across has the potential to have some pretty nice volume in the upper horizons. Kind of one of the things everybody always asks how many acres you farm. Well, man, they start asking how much volume you farm. Because if you farm 500 acres an inch deep and I farm 100 acres 8 inches deep, I farm more land than you do.
No, true. Interesting concept. Interesting. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? I see some folks on that have called me and asked about questions. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions or talk with Adam, now's your chance. Economics. How do you find a good mix that's not going to break the bank?
Okay. Well, most of our stuff, just about everything that's got started here in the county, I'm gonna go ahead and say it has been heavily subsidized. All right, through NRCS, state partners, don't really matter. It's a lot of it's been subsidized. These mixes, no matter if we run 2 or 3 things or if we run 10 or 12 things, we're usually shooting for a pound per acre. is what we're going for, you know, and it's just some combination, but most of our stuff will run in the $25 or to $30 range, these big diverse mixes. You know, if you're looking at it just straight from an economics, you know, that's just going to be whatever cereals, legumes, a few brassicas, the most locally you can get, you know. But I mean, I know you can look at, you know, a pretty laden, heavy type mix here in this area, you know, folks are just wanting to run like wheat and crimson and stuff, and we can get in that $40, $50 or that 40, 50 pound an acre range, you know, $10, $12, $15 an acre, you know. So, you know, as far as finding a cheap mix, I mean, that just goes to starting to price and source out and see where you can get, you know, quality seed from, you know, at the best price. You know, I would, you know, don't just sometimes because seed's the cheapest don't mean that you're getting the best bang for your buck. Certainly when you start dealing with ryegrass, you know, we have a real problem, you know, we can have a real problem with Italian ryegrass, and, you know, folks in my neck of the woods have spent years trying to kill it. And then here I want to start planting ryegrass again. And, you know, you got to talk about the difference in a good hybrid ryegrass. So if they're buying ryegrass and getting a pretty good deal on it, they're probably going to pay for it in the end. But, you know, as far as strategies to find it, our cost is kind of, you know, we got 3 or 4 local retailers here that's pretty much supplied all the seed to everybody. So, you know, I guess I don't, what do you consider economic? What do you consider too high? I mean, you know, folks around here used to, you know, they wouldn't bat an eye to go, you know, spend $40 an acre to spray headline on corn, you know. So, I mean, it's a cost of production, but, you know, man, it's a pretty cheap cost right there when you can start managing moisture. And, you know, what's a ton of topsoil cost in your neck of the woods, and, you know, how hard is it to get that 2 or 3 tons that you may be losing back every year. It's pretty cheap when you start looking at it in some of those realms. Or, you know, what would being able to make that one rain last another week or so right there in the critical times, it's pretty easy to start putting $20, $30 an acre investment on that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Some of these designer mixes can get very expensive. And I don't know that it's really, I don't know if it's worth it, but like you say, just find a reasonable cereal or 2 and mix it with brassica and mix it with the nitrogen fixer. Yeah.
Well, put as much diversity and as your billfold can stand, you know, is what I would promote, you know. And I don't know how aggressive other places are, you know, but there's a lot of assistance out there if you desire it to get started with, you know, some of the cost share that's out there available from different agencies. I know Erin's here, she may add in what's there available locally, but I know in Coffee County, I mean, we've spent upwards of about over $10 million in the last 7 years invested in these systems, both from cost share assistance to helping with grants on getting roller crimpers in, new technology, different ways to sow the cover crop seed. It's pretty hard to meet these logistics with a 15-foot drill. So we've looked at a lot of different ways to plant cover crops, which in our environment and our climate, we're blessed to where we can get by with some easier ways to get stuff growing, as opposed to, and you know, a little lesser rainfall or a little colder, you know, where you're battling precipitation and latitude a little bit more than we are. We're able to get by without direct drilling in some of our covers.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Actually, that's a good point. Erin, do you have any information on programs that are available to this area?
Yeah, so actually last year, we added soil health to our practices for the conservation districts in the state of Kansas. So not every county did go with that, but Labette County did. So that is one of the practices we are offering in our non-point source pollution program. So if you're interested in that, our sign up for next year will begin in March. Our early sign up will be March through April. And then if you're not from Lebec County, just contact your local county agent or your local county conservation district and see if they added that practice as well.
Great. Thank you very much. I see we've got a whole bunch of talkers on tonight. So if nobody else has any other questions, I'll thank you all very much for attending. And Adam, thank you so much for dropping in and talking to us for tonight. This was wonderful. Very good.
Thanks for having me. Best to all of you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Ma'am.